Welcome, SmythOS enthusiasts, to another exciting module of our immersive SmythOS course. I'm Sebastian Schieke, and we are diving deep into some powerful features. Throughout this module, we will be covering data pools and vector databases, creating and using data sources, implementing chatbot flows with data lookups, exporting and importing agent components, creating reusable agents, debugging and troubleshooting, asynchronous processing with async and await, creating custom GPTs using SmythOS agents, and even touching on API security and authentication. We've got a lot to cover, so let's jump right into our first topic, data pools and vector databases. Mike, can you explain what these are in SmythOS?
So for what we are going to do today, I took the LLM prompt and built it out into 3 core steps and took it a little bit further. And then instead of just taking the resolution and then dragging that over into our text file, I actually brought it into an LLM prompt along with a bunch of other information. I grabbed the title or the summary from the original JSON. The service request description is that work that we did to kind of bring those all down into one big chunk of text. The classification is a review of the description to identify and classify this particular service request. If we were doing this in a real setup, what we would do is have that classification come from a specific list, right? And I would actually use a classifier to make that function the way that we want it to. The other thing that we've done is used a summary, basically looking at the request, identifying what it would take to resolve it, identifying that summary, and then we have the skills required. So all of these things together end up making what the service requests we want to store in our knowledge base to help service desk employees to be able to query past requests to see if there's an existing answer to their question. Now, our particular service request is not necessarily fantastic at this, but I think does everybody understand the business case? That we want to take so this is a listening for new issues that are closed, taking those issues, summarizing them, classifying them, identifying the skills that were used to actually resolve the issue, and then combining all that information, uploading that into a file. And then what we're going to do is then take that along with the URL for that file and add it to a data pool using our source indexer. So we now have the service request in its kind of core form, right? We have here the service request in its form as well as the URL, and then actually, you know what we need to do here? We need to fix this because it doesn't actually give us what we need. So if we do this, what we need to do is identify the service request, and then we are going to use the source URL. And we're just going to echo this. This gives us everything we need, and this will actually then take that output and add it as a source in our data pool. All right. Everybody following along so far in terms of what we're doing? I'm going to get into the details of this, but before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about what the data pool is, and This is not going to be a technical review of vector databases and how you can query vector databases to get the quote-unquote best answer for things. That's a very technical topic and not necessary for you to understand when using Smyth. This is one of the beauties of Smyth. It actually allows you to use something that's technically pretty complex and simplify it by understanding enough of what it does at a high level to actually solve your problem.
Fascinating. So, data pools are like smart storage systems for our agents. Mike, how do we actually create and use these data pools?
I'm going to get into the details of this, but before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about what the data pool is, and this is not going to be a technical review of vector databases and how you can query vector databases to get the quote-unquote best answer for things. That's a very technical topic and not necessary for you to understand when using Smyth. This is one of the beauties of Smyth. It actually allows you to use something that's technically pretty complex and simplify it by understanding enough of what it does at a high level to actually solve your problem. So if you recall, what we're looking at doing here is taking the newly closed service requests, summarizing them, adding information about them, identifying the skills required, identifying the classification, the second level classification. This is the task of type blah, right? And then adding that as a source to our data pool, or essentially our vector database. So I want to go over here really quick, just so that we can kind of understand what a data pool is first. It's essentially a place where you can store sources. Those sources are then kind of indexed, is the easiest way to put it.
That's really helpful. It seems like data pools can store all kinds of information. Mike, what types of files can we add to these data pools?
Or basically turned into information that has semantic value that you can use that it uses to actually build a database that can then be queried with semantic questions. Like, for example, how do I set up how do I set up a data pool, right? For Smyth. You can then ask that question. It's in the data pool sources. It will then find the first best answer for that and provide that back. So to add a data pool in Smyth, what you do is you add a data space. Think about this as like, this is my database. This is my kind of set of data that is in a particular area or a particular theme. So for example, you would go ahead and put in here my service desk knowledge database. I typically don't make them this long, but just for kicks and giggles, we'll go ahead and do that. So within here, you then have sources that you can add to a database of this kind, and it will ultimately become text, but you can drop in a Word file, a docx file, a PDF, an XML file, a text file. All these things actually end up working. You can also give a sitemap to or website link to the source that you actually want to pull from. I'm going to kind of go down a bit of a rabbit hole here. For those of you who are familiar with even the basics of technical SEO, this will be old hat. For those of you who are not, I'm sorry. This will make sense once we do this. And I'm going to actually use so this file is on any quote unquote good website that has a kind of a list of directives for bots that come to your site and tell them what they can and can't do. Like, hey, don't look here, don't look here, but you can look here and you can look here. And then it also typically identifies one or more sitemaps. Usually it's just one, but you can, for example, grab this link and then use that as your source. So, for example, you can give it this sitemap and it will actually index the sitemap and then subsequently the pages that are mentioned in that sitemap, because that sitemap is not just some kind of bizarre document. It actually lists out the different pages. And these are the pages that a website manager would actually identify as, hey, bots, you can look at these, except for when I tell you you can't. And bots like, for example, Google, to actually index your site.
Incredible versatility. This opens up so many possibilities for our agents. Now, Mike, can you explain how these data pools work with LLMs?
You create your data pool. In that data pool, you have this scope of data for a number of sources. Those sources can then be used in your generation, i.e. in your agent when you pull that augmented or retrieved data out of that database. Okay? Is everybody following along? I know that can be complex. So we have LLMs that generate based on what they know, and we have RAG, which allows you to retrieve data from a database and then use that as part of the generation for an LLM. Can I get a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Everybody starting to understand RAG and data pools within Smith and how we can use them? Wonderful, wonderful. All right, thank you very much for your feedback. So if we take a look at data sources, you can have hundreds or thousands of specific data sources. Each of those data sources is kind of broken up into these chunks that the database decides on. And so you get different pieces that come back from a data retrieval, which we will actually get to later today. All right, so I want to make sure. Yep. So with that, let's go ahead and go back to our agent. So what we are doing here is we know that we want, or to have an issue expert, we need it to actually have as a set of data to work with. We want to make sure that it has essentially all the tickets that have been solved and resolved actually added to a knowledge base that we can then pull from in order to answer questions for our agents quickly and easily. So this is listening for those newly closed tickets and then pulling out the descriptions, summarizing the task, identifying the classification, the skills required, and then taking all of that information, combining it with the core sources so that you can actually then put that in a file. So even if the ticket gets deleted or moved, we now have that as a source that we can use, and then we take that source and we provide that along with that information to be indexed in our database. All right, let's take a look now at what we have in our source indexer, right? So this source indexer allows you to add to a namespace, or basically that's that If you recall, we go back to here, go back to the data pool. When we add a data space, that data space is the same thing as the namespace that we choose here. I've created this namespace already, and currently it has no data sources. How sad. But that's exactly what we can do here. We can start to add and populate this information. So this is meant to be an ongoing process. So for every closed ticket, we go through this process. We can also use it to go through the existing tickets that are in Jira that have been closed, that had, let's say, have a certain value, right? So if you wanted to pre-populate your database or your data store here, you can do that. You would basically follow the exact same process. I also, one of the things that happens is tickets sometimes aren't very clear, and it's not very understandable what you have in that ticket. So this is one of the reasons that we use an LLM. It's very good at analyzing, summarizing, and classifying text.
This is groundbreaking stuff. Data pools are truly expanding what our agents can do. In our next video, we'll take a deep dive into creating and using data sources. Mike will show us how to add data sources to our pools and even demonstrate indexing closed service requests. Stay tuned, SmythOS enthusiasts. The journey is just beginning, and it's going to be an exciting ride.